it's pretty staggering internally in the industry from a technical perspective. We are grossly unprepared for copper production going forward. So when you recognize that kind of real difference in supply and demand fundamentals, you can recognize why copper is such an important commodity for major companies to be exploring and generating more opportunities.
Today's guest is a supporting sponsor of Liberty in Finance. Welcome back to Liberty in Finance. We're delighted to have this returning guest. TEO DECHEV is the CEO of Mundoro Capital. She joins us this Friday, September 8th, 2023. TEO, thank you for coming back on Liberty in Finance.
I'm delighted to be back.
When we interviewed you in the past, you shared with our viewers a very important macro perspective of the copper supply and demand dynamics and how it is that we've come to a point, even in our modern world, where decades of neglect of investment in both exploration and development have left us poised, facing a potential drastic shortfall of copper and some other key metals going forward. But it's been a couple of quarters since we've had an update from you on that. Could you tell us what you're seeing now as someone who watches these things closely as far as the overall balance of supply versus demand and the look going as what you see going forward for copper?
It's a really interesting question, and it's a really interesting topic. The copper market, there's no denying that the copper market is fundamentally out of sync in terms of supply and demand. So I think that where a lot of the conversation tends to speculate around is really fundamentally, what is going to be demand in the future? Is demand going to be status quo? So we need copper for industrial production and expansion infrastructure. Obviously, the electrification of electric vehicles, just the grid in general. So there's a lot of layers that impact demand. But I think, and there's actually been a fantastic presentation at the last SEG meeting, which was just about a week ago in London, where there's been some great research done on what exactly does it mean for copper resources in order to meet that future demand. So let's just take base case scenario, status quo. We're not going to create more electric vehicles. We're not going to significantly increase electrification. We're not going to significantly increase the economies globally. At the current rate, in order to meet demand going forward, the hypothesis is one new mine per year. So we currently have approximately, let's say 22 million tons per year of production. So the anticipated demand just for current state is to increase to up to 40 million tons per year, in which case that's approximately one new mine per year. And to give you some context, when I say one new mine, it's the size of a Resolution new mine. And that's pretty staggering. When you look at the top 10 global mines that really impact the market, they are approximately 5 million tons per year of production. So 10 mines give 1/4 of the world's supply for copper. And if you think about the amount of time it takes to put one of those mines into production, I mean, it's pretty staggering internally in the industry from a technical perspective. We are grossly unprepared for copper production going forward. And then you start adding in those layers of, okay, well, now we want more electric vehicles. Now we want more electrification of the grid. Now we want other uses of copper. Now we see infrastructure projects increasing. So researchers have actually projected that we could be in a situation where we need up to 1.8 new mines per year. And obviously, I mean, the industry is not set up to meet those expectations. So when you recognize that kind of real difference in supply and demand fundamentals, you can recognize why copper is such an important commodity for major companies to be exploring and generating more opportunities.
We've talked a lot about copper and focused on that, but how does the outlook for copper that you've just described compare with that for other base metals?
For other base metals, I mean, Copper fundamentally has many, many more uses on an infrastructure basis and electrification. Yes, we need nickel for batteries and obviously cobalt as well. But that's a different demand than copper, which is fundamentally an electrification. We cannot exist as a society without power and electrical connectivity. So that fundamentally is driven by copper.
In the face of this need that's been unmet currently and is at risk of being unmet unless things accelerate going forward, what are some of the main challenges that are faced by exploration companies today who are trying to find those copper mines that are going to fill that gap that's needed by that supply?
I mean, I think one of the most toughest things in exploration, other than the fact that you have to obviously make the discoveries. So technically there's always a lot of hurdles. But the real fundamental issue is getting licenses that exist long enough that allow the explorer to have iterative programs in order to really determine if a even initial mineralization that you're coming into can have the potential of becoming economic over the long term into a producing mine. That's a little bit of a hard concept in a lot of the world. In North America and Canada and United States, we have pretty good mineral laws that take into consideration the life cycle of exploration. But in a lot of other jurisdictions, that concept is lost. And most of those jurisdictions work under the premise of getting a mine into production, not realizing that a mine isn't discovered in 3 years and then you can apply for an exploitation permit. So I think one of the hurdles for the industry is that certainly in North America, we've got very good exploration going up and down British Columbia, Yukon, Alaska. The Laramide Belt in the United States is a fantastic opportunity for more exploration, which is where Mundoro is. And obviously South America, but South America there, the mineral laws are a little different. And so the exploration cycle is sometimes challenged. So that's kind of one major issue. Second issue for exploration, resources. There are a lot less geologists that are still working. A lot of people have retired over the last 10 years. There is a new, let's call it cohort of geologists in the industry, but that is certainly a very small subset of the geologists that are retiring. And I think that's going to take the industry a little bit of time to transition through. So human resources is definitely one major constraint. And then last but not least is social issues. So working in regions where perhaps exploration and mining is not well understood, or perhaps it hasn't been a backbone of the economy. And so really working with those communities to explain the benefit of exploration, why it would be beneficial, and then really explaining, and by the way, this is probably not going to impact you in the next 5 years of your life. This may be in 10 years, in 25 years. And so those conversations are extremely critical in the very beginning of exploration, but they take a lot of time and effort. And so that's another challenge for exploration in general.
I'm thinking about overcoming challenges. I had an engineering career where we overcame a lot of challenges, some of them which were considered impossible, and it made a huge difference who the leadership was and who the team was. Rick Rule has introduced us originally, and one of the things that he always looks for is not only latent value that has not yet been recognized by the mainstream, but also proven performers and serially successful management teams that demonstrate they know how to get it done. And as prospective investors looking at a company, they want to know that the company that they would become part owners of has leadership and a team that knows how to get it done. Can you talk to us briefly about the leadership team and management team at Mundoro and why? Well, I guess maybe you could combine this. I was going to also ask you about partnerships, and it'll naturally lead into that. But when you are seeking and establishing major mutual partnerships that are going to be beneficial to the company and beneficial to shareholders, there must be things about your company that you make sure that potential partners find out about so that they can evaluate you and see why that would be beneficial to them. But the same thing applies to prospective investors. Why should prospective investors trust the management company at Mundoro?
It's a great question. And, you know, if you kind of put it into context, there are about just under 2,000 publicly listed exploration companies. So that's a lot of companies to choose from. And not every one of them, of course, has the generator model that Mundoro follows. So if you compare a lot of the generators, fundamentally, you know, what we believe and the way that I run Mundoro is to really fundamentally design the company around what is it that we can do in order to ensure that we have good drill targets to increase our chances for success of a copper discovery. So when you kind of put that as the underlying premise, everything that we build on top of that in terms of how we structure our data, how we build out our teams, how we govern ourselves, all of that is with that fundamental value driver that drives all of the business. And that's really what we offer to our partners. We want them to succeed, and we want our stakeholders and shareholders to succeed. And so we really make sure that our goals are well aligned with our partners' goals. And I think that's been one of the things that we've certainly become recognized for, is that, you know, if you're going to come out to Eastern Europe, Mundoro has a fantastic land package, and we have a team that is entirely geared for copper discovery, but working with the majors under this partnership model. And it's been very successful over the last 10 years. Right now, as partners, we have BHP. We have, obviously, JOGMEC, the Japanese government, which joined us back in 2016. We previously worked with Freeport and First Quantum, and now we're working with Vale and also Kinross in Serbia. And we've expanded our model into the Laramide Belt in southwestern Arizona and New Mexico. And there we're working also with Vale. And really, you know, fundamentally, our business is designed to try and create as many opportunities to be drill tested for a copper discovery that benefits both our partner and our stakeholders.
And the magnitude of these partnerships is significant. I mean, among exploration and project generator companies, it seems like your Mundoro's level of partnerships is impressive. Are there any of the particular ones you just mentioned that you want our prospective investors, our viewers, to be aware of, and why you see them as so significant?
I think they're all good. I think they're all very good partnerships. Certainly with BHP, there's a focus on the Timok region in Serbia, obviously for copper porphyries. The same goes for Vale. It's a partnership in the Timok region, and again, is focused on copper discoveries for copper porphyries. In the Southwest U.S. in the Laramide Belt, we're also there with Vale, again, the same model. With Kinross, we're in central Serbia, and that part of the country, that type of geology is a little bit more akin to copper gold porphyries, and certainly with a much stronger gold component, which is why it makes a lot of sense for the Kinross exploration efforts. And then with JOGMEC, we are currently with them in Western Bulgaria in a sediment-hosted system, again, for copper, a really interesting opportunity. And, that particular venture has kind of transitioned from Serbia into Bulgaria. So it establishes that once you have a good working relationship with partners, you can demonstrate great operational excellence in terms of out in the field, achieving the programs on budget, and essentially demonstrating those results. Partners want to continue working with you because it actually makes sense for both parties.
One of the things that people have become accustomed to when dealing with, for example, high-tech growth companies or other growth companies, exploration companies as well, is there's not always cash flow positive. Sometimes all of the revenues go back into just expanding the business model, and with the anticipation that there may become a time when there'll be a transition to either a buyout, which will benefit stakeholders greatly, shareholders greatly, or actual transition to operations where they'll be cash flow positive. But I understand Mundoro recently announced transition during 2023 to being cash flow positive. Can you tell us how that is coming to be, and what the plans Mundoro has for that cash, whether it's to just expand the model as you've described or other uses as well?
It's a good point. We work exceptionally hard in order to make it cash flow positive. It's definitely not easy, but fundamentally, here's the premise. we work with major companies, and we recognize the size and the scale of the assets that's needed for success for our partners. Junior companies having a direct project interest in these particular assets is, I think probably back in the 1980s, that joint venture model where there was a senior and a junior were kind of closer together. We didn't have such a clear divide between a senior, which is 200 billion market cap, versus a junior, which is 15 million market cap. That concept of retaining an interest as a junior, let's say 20% partner in an asset, that's an old model, and I don't really think that favors the junior. Really what you're looking for is, so what we provide to our partners is 100% earn in to the property. So if you're going to earn in 100% into the property, what's the benefit to the junior? What's the benefit to that generator to provide that opportunity to you? And so, so what we have done is restructured these arrangements. And when I say restructured, I'm restructuring from the plain vanilla, which has kind of been the premise of the industry, into these different types of contracts where the junior partner starts to generate cash flow from having generated that opportunity right from the beginning, so that we can continue to generate more opportunities. And so by changing the nature of that economic benefit, you can, as a junior company, not have to go to your shareholders every year asking for more money in order to generate opportunities, while other opportunities are locked up in partnerships with other groups. And yes, they are funding those opportunities, and there can be a discovery which can create equity value, but sometimes it might take a decade. And you can't ask shareholders to wait for a decade with dilution. You can ask shareholders to wait while there's no dilution, because then it's essentially free optionality on the investment. So that's part of the premise. The other part is obviously we get rewarded through milestone payments as well as the assets succeed. Both stakeholders participate in that. And that's obviously the large partner participates through ownership and the junior partner participates through milestone payments. And on top of that, we retain a royalty, which is really fundamentally how we create the most value out of the asset. The other value kind of streams that come to us are really just to generate more opportunities, but that fundamental big catalyst that can take an equity from 20 million market cap to $500 million market cap, which is the example of Reservoir, is that piece into that future asset, but not at the project operating level, in a royalty level, which is much more lucrative and attractive, I think, in the marketplace, as we're seeing many, many more royalty companies recognize that the value of creating a model around those assets.
You mentioned dilution. I wanted to make sure we talked about that. A lot of investors in junior miners are concerned about exactly what you described, that need for further exploration to keep coming back and funding that through dilution of the shares, bringing out more and more shares to bring in new infusions of cash, but at the cost or at the effect of diluting the ownership of those who already hold the existing shares. Can you talk to us about how Mundoro, and you've already touched on that, but if you could really explicate on that, how Mundoro helps to protect investors from dilution in that way?
Well, the only way to protect investors or shareholders from dilution is to not raise money and to actually create cash flow from your assets. So what we try and do is not go out to the marketplace for financings. We really do look at the type of arrangements that we have with our partners to ensure that Mundoro is getting rewarded through cash payments for generating the opportunities, operating those assets as well at the early phases, and then creating enough cash in order to not have to go back to shareholders asking for money and basically having to dilute them through an equity raise. I think it's actually a really, really important point in terms of our business model. Mundoro is one of those, I think, only companies that actually operates the exploration programs for our partners. So currently, we have 10 active programs within the company, and Mundoro is the operator. rather than the senior company. And I think that's actually works extremely well, simply because we've had such a long history of operating in, for example, in Eastern Europe, that we have developed a team that not only knows how to pick up ground, how to make sure it's maintained according to government standards, ensuring that inspections are properly completed, environmental laws are basically respected, that we work with communities on community engagement, and have all the team in place and contractors in place when needed to ensure that the work program is fulfilled. We all recognize that large companies have a lot of resources, but they can't be everywhere on every part of the globe. And having a local partner like Mundoro is actually extremely beneficial and extremely cost effective for them as well. So it is very much a win-win relationship.
This one is a little bit of a curveball, but our channel initially was founded 10 years ago under the title Reluctant Preppers, people getting prepared for whatever may come. And our audience remains passionately interested in looking at making sure they've got downside risk coverage. So could you maybe focus on that for a moment? What Mundoro does to address, to identify, and to strategically plan on how to reduce risk, both to the company itself, but then thereby to its shareholders as well?
It's a really good question. I mean, risk is a very, very wide concept, but let's just kind of define it right now for shareholder risk. I think the biggest challenge in junior equity investing is that you as an investor, and it depends on the type of investor, it might be a retail investor, someone who has a full-time job doing something else. They like the company, they like the projects, they like the management team, but they don't really have the time to dig in the technical details. I think fundamentally, and I think you said it earlier, aligning yourself with a management team that has not only the technical experience, but the business savvy and the responsibility to manage that business effectively is probably one of the most important criteria. And we've certainly demonstrated that over the last 10 years. So picking a management team that will stretch the dollar and create opportunities is really what you want. The second way of mitigating risk is ensuring that there's enough, that the company is well financed and can obviously achieve its goals without having to come back and dilute in the marketplace. And to that, Mundoro's answer is we have this partnership model where we are partnering with the seniors. They are funding these programs. So for example, in 2023, we have a budget, I think, that we've announced as a forecast of $15 million. So imagine having to go as a junior company to raise $15 million every year when your market cap is $15 million. It's really not an achievable goal. So one of the things that we offer our shareholders is that you can get involved with a public equity that's very tightly held, that is very well run and has excellent assets, but not only that, but is running programs that are the size for a major company and collaborating with really world experts on these exploration programs, and you're getting it without the risk of dilution. I mean, that's kind of a really, really unique investment opportunity in the public markets for copper exploration without the risk and the overhang of constant dilution, and with a really strong competent technical team and management team.
This one is going to be even farther afield, and that is, you mentioned in the beginning that there's a generational shift in the availability of geologists to carry forward into the next generation of creating that supply to meet the demand. We have a lot of our viewers are late career stage or retirement age. They have children or sometimes grandchildren who may be considering different fields of endeavor. Any words of wisdom or pleas for people to consider the benefits of entering a career? Is there something new that will be emerging, and what is needed in terms of you mentioned old school versus new ways of doing things? What does the industry need that a potential applicant or a student who's coming up through the ranks might be considering a career and have not thought about this, but maybe should consider it based on what you're seeing is needed?
Well, that is a really good question. I think that definitely Geology you have to have a passion for it. You can't, I think it would be difficult for someone who has a passion for, different type of work to go into geology. First, you have to have a passion for exploration, really a very inquisitive and scientific mind. If you have that, I think, what tends to happen is that you get these really large cohorts of students that go into a bachelor's of science, and they might go into biology, or they might go into, and usually the biology students are the ones that are kind of more interested in health or medicine. But if you're just general sciences and you're not really certain of what career direction you want to go into, then strongly consider geology. Try a few geology courses. If it's something that you'd start to gravitate to, you can build a passion for it. I think data science is extremely important. I think it's one of those fields that's going to become so incredibly intertwined. We're going to look back in 10 years and wonder how it is that we did that without a data science background. So if you have a strong inclination in data sciences, perhaps, really being a data science specialist, but geared for the minerals sector, that's another way of becoming involved. I think that's probably the kind of the perfect mix for anyone that is being hired in the industry right now. And there is huge demand. I mean, everyone will find work. There's absolutely a complete shortage of geologists and data scientists for our industry.
Sounds like outdoor and travel opportunities as well, in addition to the data science. You
definitely need to be comfortable traveling in some pretty remote areas, in some pretty rough conditions. You got to love camping. You also have to love the rotation lifestyle. People live on rotation, so it sometimes can be difficult for family life, but most of the industry walks into that, I think, with their eyes open and kind of build a life around that lifestyle.
For people who want to find out more about Mundoro and whether they should consider it more seriously as a potential investment, where should they go?
They should absolutely contact us. Of course, we have a public website. There's all of our press releases there with short summaries on some of the programs. We've got a great corporate presentation that people should absolutely look at. There's a lot of good content about the sector, some of these macro issues that we've talked about. They can definitely reach out to either myself or to our investor relations manager, Shamil. We're both very proactive with any inbound inquiries, and we love talking about the business. So please reach out to us.
Well, it was great seeing you again at the Ruhl Symposium on Natural Resource Investing in Boca Raton. And I think that's also a testimony to the company that Rick continues to invite, make sure that you're there and present at that event. Again, our viewers know him well. They've learned to trust and respect his criteria, his judgment, his work ethic of due diligence that he does. As you mentioned, 2,000 companies is a big haystack, but he finds the needles in the haystack to help us out. So we're glad to have Mundoro as a supporting partner here at Liberty and Finance, and just grateful for your presence here on the behalf of all of our viewers. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us, and we look forward to coming back and having more conversations.